Yamuna Tira Vanacha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Manaskritya. Together. Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Viriyat. Before reciting, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nastya Preshavadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. In loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental song, is established as an irrevocable fact. Okay, so this morning we've been assigned to cover chapter 25, Canto 3, chapter 25, texts 28 through, no, 26, 28 through 37. Okay, 28 through 37. So we'll go ahead and we'll read the texts, and we'll make some comments as we go along, and then come back and we'll cover text 30. All right. Translation. On hearing this statement of the Lord, Devahuti inquired, "What kind of devotional service is worth developing and practicing to help me easily and immediately attain the service of your lotus feet?"
The mystic yoga system, as you have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending material existence. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth the sublime yoga?
After all, I am a woman. It is very difficult for me to understand the absolute truth because my intelligence is not very great. But if you will kindly explain it to me, even though I am not very intelligent, I can understand it and thereby feel transcendental happiness.
Okay, so just want to bring up a couple of things from this text, and that is Often we'll see Prabhupada in his purports and sometimes in the texts, this, especially with like Devahuti, he does this, Queen Kunti does it. I'm a woman and I'm not very intelligent, therefore I can't understand. So please explain it to me. But I, usually we'll cover that kind of topic by talking about the difference between men and women. But I want to take a little bit of a different take on it this morning, and that is that in Kali Yuga, we're all less than Shudras. And the modern Kali Yugan, especially in the West, greatly lacks the kind of intelligence that's being spoken of here. And, the Vedas are very, very complex. They have very complex systems of, everything, basically. Everything that has to do with human endeavor. But the interesting thing is that the Lord has given us a system in Kali Yuga that completely bypasses one's need for intelligence, one's need for any level of material intelligence. And it makes me think of a story from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya is in southern India and he's traveling and preaching. He took 6 years. Right after he took sannyas, he took 6 years and traveled all over India preaching. And while he was in southern India, he came into a particular temple to worship the deity and to preach. And there was this young illiterate Brahmana, poor Brahmana from a poor family who couldn't read. And he would simply hold a Gita, the text of the Gita, and he would hold it upside down. He didn't even really know how to read it. And everybody would laugh at him, thinking, what kind of Brahmana is this? Here he is, he's holding this Gita. And Lord Chaitanya went up to him and asked him about that. And he said, well, my spiritual master, since I can't read, he asked me to read the Gita every day, but I can't read. So therefore, I hold this Gita and I simply think of Lord Krishna becoming the chariot driver for his devotee, Arjuna. And it causes me to just weep and weep and weep how the Supreme Lord becomes the servant of his devotee. And Lord Chaitanya declares in the midst of the temple, this man has understood the Gita. He couldn't even read, but he had a firm grasp of the meaning of the Gita. And that is to restore our lost relationship with the Supreme Lord. So I want to ask a question and get us in a discussion before we go on with the texts. What is the subtle body? What is the subtle body? What's meant by the subtle body? Anyone? Go ahead, Nate.
I guess in Western context, it's sometimes called aura, sometimes called astral body. And it's our more energetic body that is inside this material body. Looks a lot like it. And yeah.
What's it made out of? Anyone? Mind, intelligence, and false ego. And also the senses contained there is also the 3 modes. Yes, Bruce.
Does emotion make up the subtle body?
Well, certainly there are emotions that are manifested in the subtle body on a material level, yes, but there are also spiritual emotions which are connected with the soul And the soul also has a spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence, and a spiritual ego or sense of identification. But the subtle body is made up of uh, these things on a material level, subtle material level. They actually have a substance. Yes, Nate.
Um, I already said ether, and I was just wondering how ether subtle? Is ether
Ether is subtle. It is subtle, and um, ether is one of the five elements of the material creation. So ether would be included within the uh, uh, within the subtle body, but it's not necessarily just made of ether. It's actually made of subtle material elements, and those subtle material elements then manifest themselves, or they are the cause of the effect of the gross body. So that's why they look the same. When we talk about the subtle body, sometimes we mean the ghost body. But in the modern times, people often will think of that aspect of our material nature as being spiritual or as being the soul, but it's not the soul. The soul is still hidden away in the heart of the subtle body, as it were. Okay. So, what is the purpose? Why do we have a subtle body? What's the purpose of the subtle body? If we're spirit soul, pure spirit, non different from the Supreme Lord, and we're actually made up of uh, eternal knowledge and bliss, that's our real spiritual nature. What is the purpose of a subtle body? Anyone?
It goes to serve as a vehicle between the two gross bodies.
and the soul. So we're functioning through this thing.
Mhm.
So is it like a covering?
Yeah,
Because it covers us.
it's a subtle covering. Yeah.
It's a subtle covering. So you mentioned the false ego or ahankara. What is that? What is the false ego?
It's the very first covering,
It's the very first covering,
and it's a very, very thick one.
and it's very thick, for some thicker than others.
Actually, it's the thickest, counting backwards, because the earth is the thinnest,
Yeah, that's right.
and then it's mostly water. This gross body is mostly water, earth, water, fire. There's some fire there. It's even more. It's permeating the whole, and then every next one is the two times thicker.
Yeah, that's right.
So the false ego, it's pretty thick.
Very thick. So the false ego, we call it false. Ego means identity or sense of identity. The false ego is a false identity. It's that part of us which covers us so that we forget who we really are. And so the process of bhakti is a process of actually trying to rise above that subtle covering, to actually remove the subtle covering. And within that subtle covering is intelligence. But that intelligence is thoroughly and completely fixed upon material things. So it doesn't really matter what your material nature is in bhakti, especially under the advent of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There is no we need no qualification for practicing bhakti yoga. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the subtle body before we go on. The subtle body is that which covers our true identity and causes us to falsely identify ourselves with the body and the mind. It's made up of many, many, many designations, which are upadis in Sanskrit, which means all the little things that we think about ourselves. I'm American, I'm black, I'm white, I'm Indian, I'm Christian, I'm Hindu, I'm Muslim, I'm from California. I'm from Florida. These are my parents. This is where I went to school. You know, I'm a Gator fan. It's from the sublime to the ridiculous, the things that we identify with. Now, and all those are what make up the false ego. So let's go ahead and carry on here, verses. But this is what Devahuti is referring to when she refers to the fact that she's a woman and not very intelligent. Well, all of us are, in this regard, not very intelligent in Kali Yuga. She's in Satya Yuga. She's actually a very elevated personality. The Supreme Lord was just took birth from her, and I would say that this is her humility. And so she's approaching her son with a sense of humility. I'm not very intelligent. So humility becomes the doorway into which all the goodies of Bhakti Yoga and spiritual life flow to us. So we can follow in her example. But this is what she's talking about in terms of intelligence. It's that aspect of intelligence which is connected to our subtle body. And it just isn't that important in Bhakti. Let's go ahead and continue to read text 31.
Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the statement of his mother, Kapila could understand her purpose, and he became compassionate towards her because of being born of her body. He describes the Sankhya system of philosophy, which is a combination of devotional service and mystic realization, as received by disciplic successor.
So Sankhya philosophy is an aspect of the science of bhakti, which basically teaches us what Prabhupada calls the categories. Kapila Deva is the one who's revealed the essence of Sankhya philosophy, which teaches us in a nutshell the difference between that which is spiritual and that which is material. So when we were talking about the subtle body and the elements of the subtle body as opposed to the soul and so forth, that's basically Sankhya philosophy. So he goes ahead and he's teaching her this combination of pure devotional service and Sankhya philosophy so that she can understand that she's not her body. Let's go ahead and carry on.
Lord Kapila said, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and their natural inclination is to work under the direction of the Vedic injunctions. As the senses are representative of the demigods, so the mind is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that server's spirit is engaged in devotional service to the Personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better even than salvation.
Bhakti devotional service dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort, just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat.
Bhakti devotional service, when Kapila says, when it is practiced without motive, and we're engaging in the service of the Lord without any material motive, any ulterior motive, it actually dissolves the subtle body. That's really great news. Because it's a big problem that we have, this false ego and the material mind and material intelligence that keeps us tied to the senses and their objects, keeps us in a state of thinking that we're the body. We can intellectually understand Sankhya philosophy and actually believe it, but to have the actual living perception that I'm not the body, that's a whole, the realization of it, where I actually experience myself as the spirit soul, not as the body. That's a whole different ballgame. And that happens as we dissolve the subtle body. And so we start with the knowledge that I'm not the body, that I'm something higher than the body, higher than the mind, higher than the conditioning to perceive myself as the body. Now I can go about the process of actually serving the Supreme Lord in such a way that I can dissolve the subtle body and regain my constitutional knowledge, regain my understanding of who I really am. Let's go on, and we can finish the texts now, and then we'll come back to 36.
A pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and who always engages in the service of my lotus feet never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinchingly engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities.
O Mother, my devotee always see the smiling face of my form, with eyes like the rising morning sun. They like to see my various transcendental forms, which are all benevolent, and they also talk favorably.
Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord, smiling and attractive, hearing his very pleasing words, pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness. His senses are freed from all other engagements. He becomes absorbed in devotional service. Thus, in spite of his unwillingness, he attains liberation without separate endeavor.
Thus, because he is completely absorbed in the thought of me, the devotee does not desire even the highest benediction obtainable in the upper planetary system, including Satya Loka. He does not desire the 8 material perfections obtained from the mystic yoga, nor does he desire to be elevated to the kingdom of God. Yet, even without desiring them, the devotee enjoys, even in this life, all the offered benedictions.
This is interesting. So, what does it mean by the benedictions obtainable in the upper planetary systems? Even including Satyaloka. Yeah, Bruce.
All of the material opulences that are there.
So Satyaloka is basically, that's Brahmaloka. That's where Lord Brahma exists, and he lives for, I don't know what it is, like 3 trillion. Huh? 311 trillion. See? Huh? Minus 1 year. So it's a very long life. There's all kinds of opulences to enjoy. Karma doesn't function the way it functions here on earth. So there's not really any suffering there. And there are those that long for those types of benedictions. But the devotee doesn't even long for that, knowing that even that is going to end, and you still die, and you still take another birth. What's meant by the 8 mystic perfections? Huh? Well, we not necessarily name them all, but what are they in the essence? What are we talking about? We're talking about mystic perfections.
Yeah, becoming smaller than the smallest, larger than the largest, lighter than air, obtaining anything one desires, hurling globes into outer space, stuff like that. There's subtle sciences, especially material sciences, are just real subtle, and often the yogi gets distracted by them.
Yeah.
So, but Narada Muni has them all. And Vaishnavas get them through mantras, get them through herbs. You can get born with them. You get them through yoga. Vaishnavas use mantras. But what was I going to say? Gosh, that's my train of thought. They're. Oh, I know what I was going to say. One time some devotees went to Prabhupada and they said, Prabhupada, this yogi can produce an apple. He produced an apple. We saw him produce an apple. And Prabhupada said, I have 100 centers all over the world, 50 students in each center, and any one of them will bring me as many apples as I want. So that's kind of how Krishna works sometimes with devotees.
That was Neem Karoli Baba, I think that's the spiritual master of Ramdas. And he would very powerful yogi. And he would produce apples for his students sometimes after his classes. So, but the devotees like, okay, big fig. So I get these mystic cities and I become completely distracted by them. And I miss the point of the human form of life, which is to get out of the constant wheel of samsara, because after the life where you've achieved mystic cities, because your goal was mystic cities and you become distracted by the mystic cities, which is essentially mind magic, then what happens is you take another life, maybe as a dog or a germ or a plant, who knows? So the pure devotional service is the type of service to the Supreme Lord where we don't desire any of these types of things. We actually want to please the Lord because we're after one thing and one thing only, and that is to shed this subtle covering that keeps us tied to the material world, material miseries, and to make our way back home, back to Godhead. Let's go ahead and read the last one. Somebody, I can read it. 38. The Lord continued. It's 37, isn't it? Was that the last one? Okay. Let's go back to 36. I know we've eaten up most of the time here, but that's okay. Let's just go right into the English if we could, since we're lacking in time. Let's chant this together or read it together. Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord, smiling and attractive, and hearing his very pleasing words, the pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness. His senses are freed from all other engagements, and he becomes absorbed in devotional service. Despite his unwillingness, he attains liberation without separate endeavor. Someone like to read the purport?
There are three divisions of devotees: first class, second class, and third class. Even the third class devotees are liberated souls. It is explained in this verse that although they do not have knowledge, simply by seeing the beautiful decoration of the deity in the temple, the devotees become absorbed in thought of him and lose all other consciousness. Simply by fixing oneself in Krishna consciousness, engaging the senses in the service of the Lord, one is imperceptibly liberated. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Simply by discharging uncontaminated devotional service, as prescribed in the scriptures, one becomes equal to Brahman. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. This means that the living entity in his original state is Brahman, because he is part and parcel of the Supreme Brahman. But simply because of his forgetfulness of his real nature as an eternal servitor of the Lord, he's overwhelmed and captured by Maya. His forgetfulness of his real constitutional position is Maya. Otherwise, he's eternally Brahman. When one is trained to become conscious of his position, he understands that he is the servitor of the Lord. Brahman refers to a state of self-realization. Even the third-class devotee, who is not advanced in knowledge of the absolute truth, but simply offers obeisances with great devotion, thinks of the Lord, sees the Lord in the temple, and brings forth flowers and fruits to offer to the deity, becomes imperceptibly liberated. Shraddha Yanvita. With great devotion, the devotees offer worshipful respects and paraphernalia to the deity. The deities of Radha and Krishna, Lakshmi Narayan, and Ram and Sita are very attractive to devotees, so much so that when they see the statue decorated in the temple of the Lord, they become fully absorbed in the thought of the Lord. That is a state of liberation. In other words, it is confirmed herewith that even a third-class devotee is in the transcendental position, above those who are trying for liberation by speculation or by other methods. Even great impersonalists like Shukadev Goswami and the four Kumaras were attracted by the beauty of the deities in the temple, by the decorations, and by the aroma of tulsi offered to the Lord, and they became devotees. Even though they were in the liberated state, instead of remaining impersonalists, they were attracted by the beauty of the Lord and became devotees. Here the word vilasa is very important. Vilasa refers to the activities or pastimes of the Lord. It is a prescribed duty in temple worship that not only should one visit the temple to see the deity nicely decorated, but at the same time, he should hear the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, or some similar literature, which is regularly recited in the temple. It is a system in Vrindavan that in every temple there is a recitation of the Shastras. Even third-class devotees who have no literary knowledge or no time to read Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita get the opportunity to hear about the pastimes of the Lord. In this way, their minds may remain always absorbed in the thought of the Lord, his form, activities, and his transcendental nature. This state of Krishna consciousness is a liberated stage. Lord Chaitanya therefore recommended 5 important processes in the discharge of devotional service. 1, to chant the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. 2, to associate with devotees and serve them as far as possible. 3, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. 4, to see the decorated temple and the deity. And, if possible, 5, to live in a place like Vrindavan or Mathura. These 5 items alone can help a devotee achieve the highest perfectional stage. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita and here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That third-class devotees can also imperceptibly achieve liberation is accepted in all Vedic literatures.
Haribol. So, liberation, or that being lifted up above your conditioning and being enabled to operate on the spiritual platform, free from the domination of the modes of material nature and the ahankara. So this happens at the beginning. I would say that everyone who comes and is serious about practicing Krishna consciousness has experienced a taste of that liberation. It's what we call the higher taste. You chant Hare Krishna, maybe you hear the reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam or in a conversation about Krishna with the devotees, in a Harinam or Kirtan, all of a sudden it's like all your troubles disappear and the mind becomes still and you taste a little bit, just a little bit of real happiness without the mixture of misery. And this is the experience of the liberated stage. Problem is that we cannot keep ourselves there. This is a gift that the Lord gives us to encourage us to continue to hear and continue to chant and continue to worship the deities and discuss amongst ourselves, or to move into an ashram. So here we are. And the key is getting to the, getting to the place where we're actually fixed in that state of being. And it can happen very quickly, Prabhupada tells us in other places, in his purports, especially in the I think it's the second chapter he mentions it, of the Gita. He mentions it several times, that this state can be achieved immediately. And so we're offered here 5 processes whereby not only can we begin to experience periods of control of the mind and senses, which is the essence of being liberated. But we can actually very quickly bring ourselves to the place where we're able to remain there. Krishna, when he sees our seriousness and our effort and our desire to know him and acquire pure devotional service, will actually eventually give us the gift of being fixed and permanently attracted to him. Then the dissolving of the subtle body, even though it has been going on the whole time, every time you chant, every time you hear with sincerity, and you try to control your mind, this dissolving of the subtle body is going on, and the awakening of your constitutional nature, your original knowledge, and your original bliss is being brought to the surface. So, what are the five? We've talked about this many times. 5 processes. I'm going to add a 6th so that we can work on our core every day and do our exercises, 6 exercises to work on our core. Our 6-pack. Yeah, the 6-pack. Thank you.
6-pack or the 6-pack?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now. You're going to tell me what the 6-pack is. They're mentioned here, the 5 processes that are recommended to us by Prabhupada, Srimad Bhagavatam. Chanting Hare Krishna, japa,
Living in a holy place.
and kirtan, living in a holy place like Vrindavan or Mayapur or Krishna House, serving the devotees as far as possible. So associating with the devotees and serving them, and especially finding those that are more advanced than you and are walking in pure devotion and taking their association, serving them, and inquiring from them. That's the association of devotees. But still, generally speaking, living in a place where we have the consistent daily association of the Lord's devotees. What are the others? Deity worship, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. It's one of the reasons why we have these classes that Srila Prabhupada has instituted, morning Bhagavatam class, and we also just about every evening will come into the temple room and we'll read Bhagavatam for those that want to stretch out hear more Bhagavatam than they hear in the morning. And what's the others? There's 2 more, I think. Is that 5? Association, no, we've got 5. So what's the 6th? The one that's not spoken of here, but we're adding. Okay, it's go ahead. No, we did deity worship. I would say that it's making the message known to others. And we do that in our Tuesday programs and out on campus. And although it's not mentioned here in the 5 processes that elevate us, it is a form of service to the Supreme Lord, and Prabhupada mentions it as one of the prime purposes of his institution, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Gives us a place to associate with one another and practice these 5 things, but then is a platform whereby we can bring the message to others. So by instituting these 5 practices into our life, Prabhupada tells us that the process of bhakti yoga, if you institute these 5 practices or 6 practices into your daily life, you will infallibly make progress, even if you don't understand how they function, why they function. If you will practice them sincerely, even an atheist can pick these practices up, and if he sincerely wants to know whether or not this is true, that bhakti, whether or not Krishna is true, and bhakti yoga is the pathway back to God, even an atheist can eventually come to faith and have their hearts purified. Anyone can do this. regardless of what your level of intelligence is in this material world, no matter where you've gone, where you've been, how degraded or not degraded you've lived your life, doesn't matter. There is no qualification that is necessary. In Kali Yuga, in the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we give it out freely to anyone and everyone, just like we've received it freely ourselves. Freely you have received, then freely give. But it doesn't matter who you are or where you've been. You don't have to fix yourself. Psychology. Actually, there's nothing to fix. Did you know that? The material nature, the material world, and your material nature, both subtle and gross, are functioning perfectly, flawlessly. They're doing exactly what they were designed to do, and that is to keep you trapped in the material world. They function flawlessly. They do their job so well. So there's nothing to fix. You don't have to fix your psychology. You don't have to fix your emotions. None of these things are necessary. What the way out of the madness is chanting Hare Krishna, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, discussing it, worshiping the form of the Lord, living in a place where these things are being practiced. Anywhere where the people are gathering to chant Hare Krishna is the holy Dham. And associating with the Lord's pure devotees, and to the best of your ability, bringing this to others, even if it's just serving out prasadam and giving somebody a smile and saying hello and inviting them to the Tuesday program. This is the way that we actually fix what's wrong. Well, the thing that's wrong is that we're covered, because we wanted to have this experience of being like God and forgetting Krishna. So once we begin to desire to get a way out and the Lord brings it to us, it really is very simple. It's nothing to fix. Chant Hare Krishna. Hear the books, hear from Srila Prabhupada, discuss these things amongst one another. Worship the form of the Lord, contemplate the form of the Lord. Live in a holy place. Find advanced devotees and inquire from them and serve them and take their association and make the message known to others. It's really that simple. And infallibly, if we're sincere, infallibly, the process will dissolve the subtle body, will dissolve your false ego, which keeps you tied to the material concept of life. And the more that your subtle body is dissolved, the more you awaken your pure knowledge of who you are and who Krishna is. And eventually it gets completely dissolved. And when you pass from this life, you will infallibly remember Krishna, because you've spent a lifetime remembering him on a daily basis. Any reflections? Sure. In the text or somewhere else?
In the text, yeah, it says, a pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service, who always engages in the service of my lotus feet, never desires to become one with me. What does that mean? Never desires to become one with me.
In other words, the devotee always desires to be in the position of a servant of the Supreme Lord, not desiring to enter into the Brahman effulgence and lose one's identity, never desire to enter into the body of the Lord. This is the desire to actually become one with the Supreme Lord in every regard. So we see this in impersonalist practices where, for instance, like the Mayavadi impersonalist, practices their spiritual art in order to become one with the Lord. They actually believe that they are the supreme. They've become the supreme. They call each other Narayan. So that's what that's speaking of. So the devotee doesn't desire any form of liberation that takes him away from the devotional service and the relationship with Krishna. He's attached to seeking the love of Krishna and gaining his constitutional identity as a servant, either in the form of direct service or the form of a friend or the form of a lover or the form of a parent or uncle.
So never desires to become one with me is saying never desires to be on an equal plane as me?
Yes, exactly. Oh, Arisham. I just want to say one more quick thing about this. So we're already in the sense of being one with the Lord in the right way. We already are that. You can never separate yourself from Krishna as a part and parcel. That's why in order to forget him, we have to come to an illusory place and have an illusory covering. You are always on a spiritual level one, and the goal is to become one with him in purpose, which is the exchange of love. So this is the acquiring of a oneness that is equality, not oneness of purpose and oneness of exchange of love, but oneness in every sense of the word.
Rajendra Maharaj makes a great argument of why you wouldn't want to become one with the Lord. He said, we don't want to become honey, we want to taste honey. And I want to tell a quick story. One with magician story was Prabhupada. One time a magician came and started showing all his tricks. He made objects appear and disappear. And Prabhupada sat there very patiently. And when the magician was done with his routine, Prabhupada asked him, so tell me, can you make birth, old age, and disease disappear? The magician looked at him like, not really. Prabhupada smiled and said, I can.
Yeah. Can you make birth, death, old age, death, and old age disappear? Birth, death, old age, and disease disappear? No. Can make little bits of gold, pull apples out of your kurta. We want to taste honey, not become honey. Hare Krishna. Anyone else? I think we're almost out of time. If there's just one more thing.
No. You don't want to taste honey? Don't want to taste honey? Want to become honey?
It means
it's deeper. It's deeper. I don't think it's disgusting. Over my intended. Over.
Nishta.
Maybe I want to take a nap.
Just a quick comment on the note, like humility, said humility is the doorway to all good things in spiritual life. And I think that also goes along with just like accepting where you are and just like working from there. Do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you for class.
Hare Krishna. Not pretending to be something more than you actually are, just being where you are. Hare Krishna. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The assembled devotees ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Thank you for tolerating.
Fortunate person of faith, spiritual principles, the deity of Sri Govinda, Supreme Personality of God, the principle of Krishna, and Vaishnava of Bhagavan Sam ki Jai.
Yeah. I think I covered it all. It's really. I don't know. I like yeah, that is true, and a lot of times are like that. One verse a day. And it takes a long time. Exactly. Yeah, no, this is better, but it was just, it wasn't the amount of verses though, it was the fact that I was given like 5 things to cover. 5 topics out of this verse. That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot.
Well, I feel like it's also designed that like, the student can be reading the purport on their time and keeping up with the class.
That is true.
Not that anyone does that.
What's that?
Not that anyone does that.
Yeah. Come read with us.
In regards to the 6-pack, I don't want to take much time, but sometimes how do you sharing without making it available to others?
Yeah, sharing it with us, sharing the message with us.
Sometimes they add that as part of dealage.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, of course. It is.